Hi guys, welcome back to the next video on how to create a job board web app. In the previous episode, we touched on the topic of GitHub as well as VS Code, and we also created some of the files and folders that would comprise our backend, or what we called our server. What we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about creating a repo using the GitHub CLI. We're going to add a gitignore folder so that we can ignore any node modules that will be installed when we initialize our node project in our server side. And we're also going to push our code to that repository so that it can sit there and wait for us to do whatever we need to do over time. What's going to be pretty important in this is that our client side and our server side will be on separate hosting services, or rather different hosting instances on the same provider. It could be railway.app, it could be Heroku. In our case, we're going to use railway.app, but we're still a long way until we start to put our code into a type of production environment. So as you can see, we're back on our terminal. We are in the directory of our job board app. If I come in and type ls, we'll see that right now we've only got our server folder in there, and if we cd into the server and type ls, we can see some files and folders that we've created, which is great. Previously you would have seen that we created a client folder, but we're going to actually step back out of our server folder and quickly deal with creating the client. Now, because we're going to use create React app, that's going to ask us to give a name for that particular app, of which we're going to call that app client. So let's go ahead and do that. So that'll be npx create React app, and we're going to give it the name of client. So now we hit enter, and in fact I've just made a really silly typo over there, React with 2 C's. Forgive me, my keyboard has been jamming a little bit, but it shouldn't be too bad. And now what we're going to see happen is that the CLI is going to go through the process of creating this client application that is essentially the React library. So I am going to skip this installation and I'll be back with you in a moment. Great. As you can see, React has successfully been installed. We are going to clear our terminal over here so that we can just see everything back on the top. And let's go inside our directory and take a look at what we're working with over here. We can ls, and we can see that the React app named client has been installed. Let's go into client, cd client, and let's take a look at what's over there. Interesting thing to note over here is that you can already see that we have a git master that's appended to our client folder, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But right now, let's take a look at the files within our client folder. You can see that a README has been added, a node modules, there's a package lock.json, there's a package.json, there's a public file and a source file, which contains all of the sort of template files that we are going to be able to work with to make our front end look and do the things we want to do. So let's now go into our server quickly. Now, there's a couple of things that are missing from the server side. We still need to initialize our node files within the server. And what those node files essentially provide us with are really a library of files that we can use to build certain aspects of our server. So in order to initialize this sort of node package within our server, what we do is npm init, which stands for initialize. Now I'm going to hit enter, and I will join you after I've completed this setup process. Feel free to name everything the way that you want to name it. It's not too important on a type of practice scale app. So as of now, I've answered the questions, and really I've just hit enter on everything without really putting any customized information over there, which is great. Now let's take a look at what is sitting in our server. And we can see that we have a package JSON over here, which is going to be waiting for us to essentially install everything that's in the package.json. So let's go back to our root directory and let's clear that a little bit. Oops. Let's go back into our root directory. Let's take a look again at what's going on over here. And let's open it up in our VS Code. Let's take a look at this package.json to see what really has been installed. So nothing has actually been installed. Really, npm init has only added the package.json file to our server. And here you can see that it's got certain details like the name, the version, a description, which I've done nothing about, and where it's going to essentially be referring to in the files that comprise our server to be able to get that server going. And then we have our scripts over here, which is essentially going to contain commands for what we want to do when we want to launch the server, or we want to build a component of the server, or if we are in development, then we might do something like npm run dev or npm start, which will come probably in a later video. And some more details like license and author, which essentially would be your name or whatever maybe your company name. But at this point, it's not so important. What's also going to be interesting to see is that if we come into our client over here, we can see the directory that has been installed by our create react app command. Source is essentially where all of your React files will be that you are immediately working with. So now that we've got a very basic setup established, what we really want to do is push this code to a GitHub repo. So I've done things a little bit differently, and you can choose to approach this in whatever way you want to. But what we're going to essentially do right now is create a GitHub repo, one for the backend and one for the front end, so that we can push those pieces of code separately, and when we want to deploy them, they're already sitting in their own repositories instead of having to duplicate them at a later stage. So let's go ahead and create the backend quickly, the backend repo. Before I do that, let me cd into my server, and let's go ahead and do GitHub repo create. Create a new repository from scratch. We're going to say yes. The repository name is, let's call it job board server. We'll say Ilya Zolas. And we can go ahead and add these details, which I will go ahead and do. A job board for JavaScript based jobs. And in this case, we'll make it public. Do I want to add a README file right now? No. Do I want to add a gitignore file? Probably yes, but right now we will say no. Would you like to add a license? I'm going to say no also. And this will create a repo on GitHub, and we're going to say yes. In this case, we're going to say no. If I had started with this from the beginning, I would have said yes, and then the two places would have been connected already. But let's go ahead and take a look actually at our repos. And here you can see that I have the repos section of my GitHub. If I refresh that, you can see that the job board server has been created. But now we want to link what's happening locally on our machine to our GitHub repo. And in the way that I've sort of decided to go ahead building this application, what I need to do right now is I can either come through HTTPS or SSH, which I think I'll try SSH instead. And we're going to connect our origins. So the remote origin on the server currently, it looks kind of like this. If I try to take a look, git remote version, and you'll say not a repository, and we can't see anything over there. So in our server, what we're going to do is say git init, and now you can see that our server over here is appended with this git master. Now what's interesting to note is if we come into our file manager and you come into your server, you can see that all our files that we created previously are here, but why has git master suddenly appeared on the name of our folder? Well, there is a hidden file, and there's this git folder over here. So you don't really need to know too much more about that at this stage at least. But now if we try to look at what our remote URL or SSH value is, you'll see that it comes with nothing. So git remote add origin, and we can paste our SSH value. Now if we go git remote version, you can see that our details are over here. Excellent. So we're not quite done yet. We need to add a gitignore folder. So what I'm going to do is say touch.gitignore, and a gitignore file will have been created within here. But as you can see, there's no file really being shown because the dot over here really says that we're doing something that should be a hidden folder. So here we can see the .gitignore. But what we can also do is come back into our code over here, into our VS Code, and we can see that this gitignore file exists right over here. So we've created our gitignore file, and you can see over here I've pasted a couple of values, and essentially what I'm saying is GitHub ignore all node modules, as well as ignore a .env file, and also ignore these files too. These files are essentially the files that I would use to have a self-signed SSL certificate so that I can have a HTTPS URL, which will make it much easier for me to deal with CORS policies, but you don't need to worry about that just yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file, and now that we've got our remote values added and we've got everything sorted the way we want it, let's try and push it up to our GitHub repo. The way we do this is git add. This will take all the files that we've got and add it to our GitHub branch. We can say git status to see what has been added. Oh, in this particular case it says there's nothing to on branch master, no commits yet, but it has noticed that there are certain files that exist over here that are currently staged for committing. So let's go git commit, and let's add a message. In my case, I'm going to say initialize app. Wonderful. And then we're going to say git push origin master. And it looks like it was successful. So if we go to our GitHub server, we refresh that, we can see that we've got at least the files that we created previously. Now these files don't include the folders that we previously created because those folders don't yet contain files with code in them to do something. So the next thing we're going to do is go into our server, into our client, sorry. Let's go git remote version, and you can see that there is no actual remote version. We've just got an initialized front end. So what we're going to do from this side is we're going to go and do another GitHub repo create. Create a new repository from scratch. We're going to call it job board client, and then we're just going to fill in all the details with whatever we want. A job board for JavaScript based jobs. Make it public. Do I want readme file? Do I want a gitignore? Do I want license? This will create that exactly. And we're going to say no because it's just going to totally wipe out our local repository. We're going to go to the SSH value, which is where I'm currently at. So we're going to go ahead and stick that SSH key into our remote origins. Git remote origin. Now let's go git remote version, and there it is. They are linked. So let's also confirm that we actually have a gitignore file. And we can see actually that we have a gitignore folder waiting for us right now, which is great. So we'll go back over here. We're going to try and send all of our code to GitHub. Come into our app.js file, and we'll just make a quick little edit. This is Ilya, and we'll save that. Now what we will do is go git add, git commit, initialize app git push origin master. Put in my password, and we can see that it was successful. So let's go and take a look at our client side and see if everything has been pushed. There you can see that there's the public file, the source, there's our git ignore, a readme, and our package lock and package JSON, and a templated readme over here, which we're not going to worry too much about. I mean, we're going to totally change all of that in a later video. So as it currently stands, what we have is a client and a server that have almost all of their necessary dependencies installed, which of course, as usual, is wonderful. So after all that work, you're probably dying to see something visual at this stage. So I want to show you how we can do that and how I like to work with VS Code to achieve a easier workflow. So here I've opened up a new terminal in VS Code, and normally I like to work with 3 instances of a terminal. In this case, I can now move into my server, where I can do any commands related to the server. Then I'll cd into my client in the next terminal tab, so I can work with my client. And then this one remains as a sort of general directory in case I need to do something in the more parent directory, which I don't foresee having us to do, but that's cool. You don't need to worry too much about that. So let's try and launch our React app, at least the front side. In order to really understand what I'm about to do, we look at our package.json, which you can see is a lot more complete than the server side's package.json. And here you can see that they've provided us with a couple of scripts in order to be able to see or build or test or eject our React build. Here you can see that there is the start, and when we're looking with these package.json files, we know that it's typically a npm type command. So coming into my terminal in the directory of client, I'm going to say npm start, and let's see the magic unfold. You'll see that it starts to create an instance of our React app, and it's going to appear here in our browser, as you can see it loading up on the port localhost 3000. And there we go. We have our front end installed and clearly working. We have also gone ahead and we've created our GitHub repos, which we're going to go and quickly take a look from the other side over here. We have the job board server, which I'll open in a new tab, and then open this in a new tab. If we come to the server, we don't have it completely uploaded there yet, but that's okay. If we come into the client, we can see that most of our files have been uploaded, which is great. What have we learned today? We've learned that we use GitHub for version control. We've learned how to add a remote origin to our local instance of our repo so that it is connected to our GitHub repositories. We have seen how to add, commit, and push our code. And we have also installed React app as our client. And we have also launched it, and we're able to see the React app working in our browser. So that's it for this particular video. In the next videos, we're going to be getting our server up and running, and we'll be creating the subsequent files within the folders that we previously recorded, and we will launch that server to see that it's working. We'll also be taking a look at MongoDB, which is a non-relational database, which I find quite easy and fun to use, and set up a database for this particular app, and I'll show you how to do that. So thank you so much for your time again, and I'll see you in the next video.